when we speak of the empath, of the one whose soul is woven from delicate threads of sensitivity, we are not merely describing a personality trait, but an existential condition, a psychic wound that has been transfigured into a gift. To be an empath is to live as if the walls between the self and the other have become porous, dissolving into a subtle atmosphere where one breathes not only one's own emotions, but the emotions of everyone else. Yet, to this very gift that makes you luminous also makes you dangerous in the eyes of those who claim to love you, but in truth harbor an unconscious envy that gnaws at the foundation of the bond. And I must tell you that envy is among the darkest of the emotions, for it does not admire, nor does it simply desire, it resents. It is a poison that looks upon light and wishes either to extinguish it or to cover it with shadow, so it no longer shines. You must understand that envy in relationships is rarely conscious. Few will admit, even to themselves, that they are envious of the one they say they love. Instead, it emerges in subtle gestures, in tones of voice, in the sudden withdrawal of warmth, in the casual remark that cuts like a knife, though disguised as play. For envy is a shadow-born force, and shadows do not stride into the open. They creep, they disguise, they mask themselves behind the language of affection. Thus, those who pretend to love you may unconsciously be seeking to diminish you, to obscure the radiance of your presence, because the mirror you hold up to them reveals their own poverty of spirit, their inability to feel with the same depth, their fear of the very intimacy they claim to desire. The empath's gift is not a choice. It is the destiny of one whose psychic membrane has been torn open in early life, often by pain, rejection, or abandonment. The child who grows in a household where love is conditional or absent learns to survive by tuning into every subtle shift of mood in others, for their safety depends on it. They learn to feel what others feel before those others themselves are aware of it. They learn to anticipate, to appease, to absorb, and this adaptation, forged in suffering, later appears as a radiant capacity for compassion. But here lies the paradox. What was once a survival strategy becomes both a blessing and a curse in adult life. For the empath carries an open wound that others both long to drink from and simultaneously despise. Because it exposes them, those who envy the empath do not envy wealth, nor beauty, nor accomplishment. What they envy is the soul's light, the capacity to feel truth in its raw immediacy. They envy the authenticity of one who cannot help but live in the immediacy of emotion. In the collective unconscious, there is an archetype that governs this drama. It is the archetype of the wounded healer, who by virtue of their wound can heal others, but also draws to themselves those who wish to steal that healing for themselves without ever acknowledging its cost. Such people will draw close under the guise of love. But what they truly desire is to partake of your essence, to bathe in the warmth of your sensitivity, and then, once filled, to resent you for making them aware of the emptiness within. Let us not underestimate envy It is not simply jealousy. It is far more corrosive. Jealousy still wishes to possess. Envy wishes to destroy. If you shine too brightly, the envious one seeks to dim you, for your light reminds them of their own darkness. Thus, they will offer you love laced with subtle sabotage. They may withhold affirmation when you need it most, laugh at the seriousness of your emotions, or minimize the very qualities that define you. They may claim that you are too sensitive, that you overthink, that you dramatize. What they mean unconsciously is that your sensitivity unsettles them because it exposes what they cannot bear to see in themselves. In this way, the empath becomes a mirror, and those who look upon it, rather than rejoicing, often recoil in resentment. Consider the dream motif of the banquet, in which one is invited to a great hall filled with tables of food and laughter. But upon sitting down, the dreamer realizes the plates are empty or filled with ashes. This is the archetypal image of false love, love that promises nourishment but delivers nothing, or verse délivre poison. For the empath, this dream becomes reality in their relationships. They are invited into closeness. They are offered the language of intimacy, but beneath the surface, the one who loves them feeds upon their soul while giving nothing in return. And when the empath shines, when their radiance naturally emerges, the other's envy fills the banquet hall with ashes. This is why so many empaths live in confusion. They ask, why do the ones I love turn cold? Why does the warmth I give not return to me in kind? The answer is that envy has infected the bond. The very light that drew the other to you now becomes intolerable, for it reveals the depth of their pretense. Envy cannot coexist with genuine love, for love rejoices in the other's being, whereas envy resents it. Love seeks to nurture. Envy seeks to diminish, and so the empath, unless they awaken, becomes ensnared in a tragic cycle, giving, absorbing, healing, and then being punished for the very gift they give. But let us go deeper. Why do empaths trigger envy in those who pretend to love them? It is not merely because they feel deeply. It is because they embody a truth most people run from. The modern human being, shielded by persona, armored with masks, has grown accustomed to living at a distance from their own depths. To encounter an empath is to be reminded that the soul is alive, rav, vulnerable, and many cannot bear this. Thus, envy is a defense of the shallow self against the mirror of authenticity. The persona, threatened, whispers to the unconscious, destroy this one, for they show me what I have lost. And so envy arises as the shadow's rebellion against the call to individuation. The empath's challenge is therefore not merely relational but archetypal. They embody the archetype of the sacrificer, the lamb who takes upon themselves the emotions of others. This role has both a Christ-like radiance and a perilous naivete, for to carry the emotions of others without discernment is to open oneself to possession, to vampirism of the soul. And when those who claim love are secretly envious, they become precisely such vampires, feeding upon the empath's sensitivity while resenting them for having it. Here I must caution. The empath must learn boundaries, not walls, for walls deny the essence of empathy, but sacred thresholds, for the soul must not be endlessly drained by those who envy what it cannot replace. Boundaries are not an act of cruelty. They are the recognition that the gift must be preserved if it is to fulfill its purpose. Without them, the empath is devoured by envy, disguised as love. With them, the empath becomes a beacon shining without apology, and revealing to others the path they themselves might walk if they dare to confront their own shadow. There is in myth the image of Narcissus, who could not love anyone because he was entranced by his own reflection. But less often spoken of is the one who loved Narcissus, the nymph Echo, who withered away because her love was not reciprocated. The empath often plays the role of echo, giving voice to the other's needs, reflecting their moods, yet fading because the love is one-sided. What happens when Narcissus looks upon Echo? He envies her capacity to feel, but he cannot mirror it back, for he is trapped in his own shallow reflection, and so he offers nothing but emptiness, while secretly despising the vitality of the one who loves him. Thus, envy and false love entwine. Dreams of drowning are common among empaths. They report waters rising around them, of being submerged, of trying to save others from the flood. These dreams reveal the psyche's warning. The waters of feeling are overwhelming, and if boundaries are not set, one's own identity may dissolve. When others envy you, they will gladly let you drown in their waters, for your drowning absolves them of confronting their own depths. They will call it love. They will thank you for your sacrifice. But secretly, they will relish that your light is dimmed, because it makes their own shadow less visible. To awaken from this tragic pattern is to reclaim the wound that made you an empath, not as a curse, but as a calling. You must look into your own shadow, into the pain of the child who learned to absorb everything and say, I will no longer be consumed. I will feel, but I will not be drained. I will love, but I will not allow envy to disguise itself as devotion. This is individuation for the empath to recognize the archetype of the wounded healer within and to transform it into the healer who heals themselves first. If you find yourself always triggering envy in those who say they love you, recognize that you are a mirror. You show them what they have denied, and know this: their envy is not your burden. It is theirs. To carry it for them is to betray yourself. You may hold compassion, but you must not sacrifice your essence to appease the shadow of another. Instead, let their envy teach you discernment. Let it be the fire that forges your boundaries. For only then can your empathy become a conscious gift rather than an unconscious wound. When I speak of envy in those who pretend to love you, I must emphasize that it often remains unspoken, even invisible to ordinary consciousness. The envious person rarely admits, even to themselves, that they harbor resentment toward your sensitivity. Instead, it manifests as subtle interruptions, as if they were trying to scatter the rhythm of your inner music. You may be speaking about something deeply felt, and suddenly they laugh, not with you, but at you, breaking the current of your sincerity. They call you too much, or suggest you are imagining what you feel. These small daggers accumulate, and they wound you not because you believe them, but because they come from the very lips that whispered love. It is not the stranger who destroys the empath. It is the one who enters under the guise of affection. The psychological root of this dynamic lies in projection. Every human being carries a shadow, a reservoir of repressed desires, failure, and inadequacies. When such a person stands before an empath, their unconscious begins to stir. They see in you not only your gift, but also the reminder of what they have refused to develop in themselves. And because the psyche resists what it cannot yet integrate, it attacks. The easiest way to avoid responsibility is to project. Thus, they project weakness onto you. They tell you that you are fragile, unstable, over-emotional. Yet, ironically, it is they who are fragile, for they cannot endure the raw truths that you embrace daily. In the collective psyche, envy appears as a serpent. This is no coincidence. The serpent from ancient times has symbolized both wisdom and poison, both transformation and destruction. Envy slithers silently between people, curling itself around the bond until it constricts, until warmth becomes suffocation. Many empaths find themselves wondering why love that began with admiration becomes, over time, cold and controlling. It is because admiration, when shadowed by envy, transforms into resentment. The same qualities that drew them to you, the tenderness, the intuitive insight, the unguarded openness, become unbearable reminders of what they cannot face in themselves. Let us take an image from alchemy, for alchemy is the language of psychic transformation. The alchemists spoke of the nigredo, the blackening stage, when the old self begins to dissolve in shadow. This blackening is necessary for gold to be born, but many resist it. They refuse the descent. They cling to the mask of persona and will not enter their own depths. When such a one encounters an empath, it is as if the empath radiates the very nigredo they are fleeing. You remind them unconsciously of the work they must do. Rather than facing it, they envy you, for you are living proof that the descent is survivable. You feel deeply, and yet you live. You do not shatter in the presence of grief, but rather you transmute it into compassion. This threatens them because it unmasks their avoidance. The envy of the false lover has a particular sting. It hides behind tenderness. It offers words of affection, but cloaks acts of diminishment. This duality confuses the empath, for you long to believe the words, yet the deeds tell another story. It is a split, an inner contradiction, and that contradiction is precisely how envy operates. It does not destroy openly, for that would reveal its presence. It destroys covertly, like a moth that slowly eats away at fabric, until one day the garment falls apart in your hands. You may have noticed dreams where you are given gifts wrapped in beautiful paper, only to unwrap them and find nothing inside, or worse, something rotten. This is the psyche's way of showing you false love, love that arrives in words but carries no substance, or carries poison wrapped in gold. When you awaken from such dreams, do not dismiss them as fanciful. They are revelations. They are the unconscious telling you, beware of the one who cloaks envy in the language of care. The empath's pain is heightened by their longing for authenticity. You crave love that celebrates, not diminishes. You seek relationships where your sensitivity is not a burden but a blessing. And so you remain hoping the other will change, hoping they will one day awaken to the truth of your gift. But envy rarely awakens without great effort. It festers in the dark, and those who pretend to love often have no interest in confronting their own shadows, for that would require dismantling the mask they so carefully constructed. Why do they pretend? Because their need and their resentment are bound together. They need your light, but they resent your radiance. They drink from your well, but despise you for revealing their thirst. This is the tragic paradox of false love. The one who pretends cannot let you go, for they crave the nourishment of your soul. Yet they cannot truly embrace you, for your very existence exposes their own emptiness. And so the empath finds themselves caught in a dance with envy. You give, they take, you shine. They dim you, you forgive, they wound again. This cycle continues until you awaken to its archetypal nature, until you realize that you are not merely dealing with one person's behavior, but with a collective pattern, an ancient drama that has played out in countless forms. It is the drama of Cain and Abel, where Abel's innocence and favor provoke Cain's envy, leading to destruction. It is the myth of Joseph and his brothers, where the dreamer's gift provokes hatred. These stories endure because they reveal the archetypal truth. Those who embody light often awaken envy in those unwilling to awaken themselves. Yet, we must not fall into victimhood, for the empath is not doomed to suffer this forever. You are called to consciousness. You are invited to see the pattern not with bitterness but with clarity. The wound that made you an empath can also make you wise. If you can recognize envy for what it is, you can refuse to carry it. You can say, this is not mine. I do not exist to bear the burden of another's shadow. I exist to become whole. Individuation requires this refusal. For as long as you absorb envy under the name of love, you remain trapped in the persona of the sacrificer. You play the role others assign, rather than embracing the fullness of your own self. Only when you withdraw your consent to be drained, only when you step back from false love, do you enter the path of true transformation. Then your empathy ceases to be an unconscious wound and becomes a conscious vocation. This will not be easy. The false lover will accuse you of betrayal. They will say you are cold, that you have changed, that you are selfish. But recognize this language for what it is. It is the cry of envy as it loses its host. It is a desperate attempt to keep you bound in the role of self-sacrifice. Do not be deceived. To set boundaries is not cruelty. It is truth. It is to honor the divine spark within you, the spark that must not be extinguished for the comfort of another's shadow. The archetype of the empath is intimately tied to the archetype of the martyr. But you are not called to endless martyrdom. Even Christ, in the Garden of Gethsemane, set the boundary. Not my will, but thine. He chose the cross not because others demanded it, but because it was his path to individuation, his fulfillment of the self. The empath must learn to distinguish between sacrifice that arises from divine vocation and sacrifice that arises from unconscious compulsion. The former transforms the world. The latter merely feeds the envy of others. If you continue to give where envy reigns, your soul will wither. But if you step back, if you honor the sacredness of your own being, something remarkable occurs. Envy loses its grip. For envy cannot survive in the presence of one who refuses to be diminished. It feeds on your compliance. It thrives on your silence. But when you speak, when you shine without apology, it retreats into the nothingness from which it came. You may ask, what then of love? Does the empath resign themselves to loneliness? No, for when you withdraw from false love, you make space for true love. True love does not envy. It delights. It rejoices when you shine brighter, because your radiance calls forth its own. True love is rare, but it exists, and only when you cease to confuse envy for devotion will you recognize it when it appears. Dreams of flight often accompany this awakening. The empath who has been drowning suddenly dreams of wings, of rising above, of seeing the world from a new height. This is the psyche's affirmation that freedom is possible, that your sensitivity need not bind you to suffering, but can become the wind that lifts you into your destiny. Thus, I tell you, envy is not your master. It is the shadow's rebellion, but you need not submit. You are not fragile. Though they will call you so, you are not too much. Though they will accuse you of excess, you are the mirror of what they refuse to see. And your task is not to dull the mirror, but to hold it steadily, even if they turn away. In this, you will begin to embody the archetype of the sovereign empath, the one who feels deeply yet stands firmly, who loves truly yet refuses pretense, who gives generously yet guards their essence. And when you do, envy will no longer trigger confusion within you. You will see it for what it is, a signal, a signpost, reminding you of the strength of your own light. There is a peculiar alchemy at work when an empath encounters envy masked as love It is as though two opposing forces are drawn together, your openness, your willingness to feel, colliding with the other's refusal to feel. The result is a psychic tension that can either transform both souls or destroy the bond entirely. If transformation is resisted, then destruction inevitably follows. This is why many empaths carry within them a trail of broken relationships, not because they are incapable of love, but because they awaken something in others that those others would rather keep buried. You stir the unconscious, and the unconscious rarely stirs without consequence. Imagine for a moment that the human psyche is like a vast cathedral. In most people, only the front nave is lit. The persona, the socially acceptable mask, the roles that one can display without fear, but the deeper chambers, the crypts and shadowed alcoves remain dark. Few dare to wander there. The empath, however, enters relationships carrying not only a candle but a torch. Your very presence illuminates corners that others have spent a lifetime avoiding. This is why they become envious, for when you light the shadows, you show them what they have denied, and in that exposure, they feel both threatened and diminished. Envy is not always expressed in overt hostility. More often, it comes as a quiet undermining. It may arrive as a sigh when you share your joy, as silence when you need affirmation, as distraction when you reveal your heart. Each act, taken alone, may seem small, but together they form a pattern, a deliberate dimming of your flame. And because you feel deeply, you sense this, even when no words are spoken. You feel the subtle withdrawal, the hidden resentment, and it pierces you more sharply than any overt rejection. This is the empath's curse. To detect even the unspoken, many of you have had dreams of being chased not by monsters, but by people you know. In these dreams, you run not because you are weak, but because you sense that the one who smiles at you by day harbors something predatory by night. This is envy in its dream form. It is the psyche's attempt to show you what your waking mind resists. You want to believe their love, but the dream tells you otherwise. The dream says, you are being hunted, not cherished. Do not ignore these dreams, for they are revelations of the soul from a psychoanalytic perspective. Envy is a complex bound to the shadow. It is the child of inferiority and repression. When a person cannot admit their own lack, they seek to diminish others. They cannot say, I feel inadequate. So they instead say, you are too much. This inversion is the very mechanism of envy. It projects the wound outward, making the empath the problem, and because you are open-hearted, you may accept this accusation, believing that perhaps you are indeed too sensitive. But this is a lie envy tells to preserve itself. You are not too sensitive. You are precisely as sensitive as your soul requires to fulfill its purpose. The archetype that often surfaces here is that of the vampire, not the romanticized creature of popular fiction, but the ancient symbol of the soul feeder, the one who cannot generate their own light and therefore feeds on the vitality of others, false lovers who envy you become psychic vampires. They draw close, not to share, but to consume. They take your compassion, your patience, your capacity to forgive, and they leave you depleted, and then, paradoxically, they blame you for your exhaustion. They say, you are always tired, you are always emotional, without ever seeing that they have been drinking from your essence. But let us not condemn them as monsters, for they too are victims of their own unconscious. The vampire is an image of the soul that has forgotten how to connect to the source within. Such people envy you because you still have a thread to the depths, even if it wounds you. They envy you because your soul is alive, while theirs is half asleep, and though their actions may harm, they are also a cry for what they cannot name. The empath must learn to hear this cry without being devoured by it. This requires discernment, a capacity to recognize this envy is not mine to heal, for too often the empath becomes the caretaker of envy. You try to soothe it, to love it away, to bear it on your shoulders. But envy cannot be soothed by sacrifice. The more you give, the more it resents you, because your giving reveals its dependence. The only path is to step back, to let the envious one confront their own shadow. This is not abandonment, it is respect. Respect for the integrity of their soul, which must awaken itself. In myth, we see this in the figure of Psyche. She was loved by Eros, but only in darkness, for he feared she would see his true form. Yet Psyche's soul longed for vision, for truth. When she lit the lamp to gaze upon him, the illusion was shattered, and she was cast into trials. This is the empath's journey. You love, but you also see, and when you see, those who envy you recoil, for your vision unmasks them. Yet it is only through seeing that you can free yourself. Consider also the archetype of the mirror. To love an empath is to look into a mirror that does not flatter. You do not reflect the persona, but the soul, and many cannot bear such a reflection. They would rather shatter the mirror than confront what it reveals. Envy, therefore, is the hammer they raise against you. But remember this: a mirror cannot be destroyed by being denied. It still reflects, even if they turn away. You remain what you are. The path forward requires courage, for when you step out of the dance of envy, you will feel the loneliness of standing in your own truth. You will no longer be sustained by the illusion of false love. You will no longer appease those who resent you. But in this loneliness, you will discover a new strength. You will realize that your sensitivity is not weakness, but initiation. That you are not here to be everyone's caretaker, but to become whole in yourself. This is individuation, the process by which the soul becomes itself, not by pleasing others, not by dimming, but by embracing the totality of what it is. And for the empath, individuation means reclaiming the wound of childhood, the wound that taught you to survive by absorbing others and transmuting it into conscious choice. You choose when to feel, when to give, when to open. You choose rather than being compelled. And in this choice lies freedom. The false lover, when confronted with your awakening, will not understand. They will call you selfish, cold, distant. They will say, you have changed, but you must see through this. They do not mourn you. They mourn the loss of their supply. They grieve not your love, but the convenience of your self-sacrifice. Do not be deceived. Their words are not truth, but the shadows lament. Dreams of doors often arise at this stage. You may dream of standing before a door, sometimes locked, sometimes ajar. This is the threshold of individuation. To step through is to leave behind the cycle of envy and false love. It is to enter a space where your empathy is no longer a wound, but a gift. And though the threshold is frightening, beyond it lies authenticity. I tell you this not to harden your heart, but to awaken it. For true love does exist. It is rare, but it is real. True love is not envious. It delights in your light because your light reminds it of its own. It does not drain, but nourish. It does not resent, but rejoices. And you will know it when you encounter it, for it will not demand that you be less. It will invite you to be more. Until then, you must become the guardian of your own soul. You must hold your empathy as sacred, not to be squandered on those who pretend, but to be shared with those who honor it. For only then will you fulfill your destiny, not as a victim of envy, but as a vessel of truth. And perhaps in time, even those who once envied, you may awaken. Perhaps your refusal to be drained will force them to confront their own emptiness. Perhaps they too will enter the descent, the nigredo, and discover their own capacity to feel. But whether they do or not is not your burden. Your task is to walk the path of individuation, to carry your light with dignity, and to remember always, envy is the shadow's cry, not the measure of your worth. When you understand the nature of envy in those who pretend to love you, you begin to see that this is not merely a personal misfortune, but a universal mystery. It belongs to the ancient struggle between light and shadow, between authenticity and pretense. The empath stands at the fault line of this tension. You are both blessed and burdened by the fact that your soul refuses to live in the shallow waters where most people linger. You are called into the depths, and by entering, you expose the avoidance of those around you. Envy, then, is the inevitable reaction of the shallow self confronted with depth. It is the mask that sneers at the face behind it. In the midst of every culture, there is a story of the shining one who provokes envy. In Greece, it was Orpheus, whose music opened hearts and even softened the gates of Hades, but whose gift also left him vulnerable to betrayal. In the Hebrew story, it was Joseph, the dreamer, hated by his brothers because his visions implied favor. In the Christian mystery, it was Christ himself whose light provoked envy among the authorities. These figures are archetypes of the empath, carriers of light who awaken envy in those who live by pretense, and just as they were tested, so too must you be. The danger for the empath is not only in being wounded by envy, but in internalizing it. When you begin to believe the accusations of those who pretend to love you, you betray yourself. You begin to say, perhaps I am too much. Perhaps my sensitivity is weakness. Perhaps my longing for authenticity is naive. This self-doubt is the true poison envy seeks to implant, for envy knows that if it can make you silence yourself, it has won. The outer voice becomes the inner critic, and soon the empath polices their own light, dimming it before anyone else can. That is how envy survives across generations, not merely in the actions of others, but in the inner saboteur it leaves behind. But here lies the turning point. To awaken is to recognize this inner voice for what it is, not truth, but shadow. You must face it not with hatred, but with clarity, for every empath carries within them not only light, but also their own shadow. There is a part of you that longs to be needed, to be indispensable, to be the one who saves. This shadow keeps you bound to envious lovers because you secretly feed on their need. And so the relationship becomes a tragic mirror. They envy your light and you cling to their dependence. Both are trapped. Liberation comes only when you confront your own shadow, when you admit, I am not here to save, I am here to be whole. This confrontation is terrifying, for it demands the death of the false self. It demands that you release the identity of the sacrificer, the eternal caretaker, the one who absorbs. And in releasing it, you face the abyss of not knowing who you are. This abyss is the very threshold of individuation. It is the dark night of the soul, the wilderness where the old maps fail. And yet, it is only here that your true self can emerge. In dreams, this often appears as a death motif, lying in a coffin, being buried, or watching an old version of yourself dissolve. These are not dreams of doom, but of transformation. The psyche is saying, the old empath, the one enslaved by envy, must die, so that the sovereign empath may be born. And in this death, you discover a new power, the ability to feel without being consumed, to give without being drained, to love without being diminished. When this rebirth occurs, envy loses its sting. You begin to see it not as a threat, but as a signal. You recognize when someone's admiration is laced with resentment, you no longer deny it, no longer make excuses for it. You say, this is envy, this is not love. And you step back. You protect your light. You do not apologize for it. You understand that your sensitivity is sacred, not to be squandered on those who cannot honor it. This is the wisdom of the individuated empath. to hold compassion without self-betrayal, to see clearly without losing tenderness, and then something remarkable happens. You attract a different kind of love, for when you cease to confuse envy with devotion, you become a magnet for authenticity. Those who are not threatened by your depth, but nourished by it, draw near. Those who have faced their own shadow rejoice in your light, because it reflects their own. In such relationships, your empathy is not a wound, but a gift. It is celebrated, not resented. You are no longer a mirror that others try to shatter, but a flame that calls forth other flames. This is the higher destiny of the empath, to become not a victim of envy, but a teacher of authenticity. By refusing to be diminished, you reveal to others that it is possible to live with depth. By protecting your sensitivity, you show that boundaries are not barriers but bridges to truth. And by embracing your whole self, shadow included, you invite others to do the same. Do not expect the world to reward you for this. Many will still envy, many will still pretend, but you will no longer be deceived. You will no longer mistake ashes for bread or poison for love. You will walk with eyes open, and your very presence will be a judgment on pretense. Some will flee from you, others will resent you, but the few who are ready will be drawn to you like moths to a flame. And with them, you will know the joy of love untainted by envy. In the end, the question is not why empaths trigger envy in those who pretend to love them. The question is, what will you do when envy arises? Will you collapse under it, believing its lies, or will you stand, recognizing it as the shadow's rebellion? Will you betray yourself to preserve the illusion of love, or will you guard your soul and wait for love that does not envy? This is the decision upon which your individuation turns. I tell you this as one who has wandered the labyrinth of the psyche. The way is difficult, but it is real. Envy will always exist, for as long as there are souls who refuse their own depths, but it need not master you. You can choose to see it, to name it, to step aside. You can choose to honor your sensitivity as a divine spark, as the seed of wholeness within you. And when you do, envy becomes powerless. It can hiss, it can sneer, but it cannot consume. So take courage. Do not apologize for your depth. Do not dim your light to comfort those who envy you. Do not mistake pretense for devotion. Walk the path of individuation with dignity. For though the way is lonely, it leads to truth. And in truth, you will find love that does not envy, love that delights, love that celebrates your being. This is the destiny of the empath who becomes whole. And when you reach that place, you will look back on those who pretended to love you and see them with new eyes. You will no longer feel bitterness, but compassion, for you will know that their envy was never about you. It was about the shadow they refused to face, and you will release them not with anger, but with freedom For you will have learned the final truth, that no envy, no pretense, no shadow can extinguish the light of a soul that has embraced itself. This, my friends, is the original message hidden in the envy you awaken. It is not a curse, but a calling. It is the soul's way of telling you, rise, protect your light, and become who you are,